gavel on the thing. I'm actually beating the gavel. Welcome to tonight's meeting, our work session, which we will start with an agenda review. First thing is going to be the approval of the minutes. We're going to have two presentations on Tuesday, one from our local state representative, Mandisha Thomas, and then also a quick proclamation for the Superior Court clerk who's retiring. Stop me. Our normal staff reports, and then we'll go right into a public hearing and action on the movie studio rezoning. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Mike, do you want to walk us through where we are on that? Mike is not hearable.
Should I stand up? You want me to stand up? Check, check, check. I can stand up here.
I don't know.
Is this one on? Hello, hello. Okay.
I do not have those controls at my desk.
All right. I can stand. So we have an application, as you all are well aware. No, you don't hear me?
For that one.
No. Well, Mike just either.
And I'm back here. Hello, hello. Anybody? Bueller, do you hear me? No. If I talk louder, does that help?
No.
This one? Back here, is that better? Anybody?
Talk real loud.
Well, I can talk loud enough for the room.
No, this is about making sure that the people on Zoom can hear us.
Right,
So.
right. Check. Hello. Channel 1, it says here.
Channel 1. You should be good now.
Check now. This one, good.
Perfect.
Got me. Good. All right. So y'all are, of course, very familiar with this application for a rezoning, 3 variances and 5 special use permits for a little over 1,600 acres on Campbellton Red Wine Road, between Campbellton Red Wine Road and the Chattahoochee River, south of Jones Ferry Road.
Oh, okay. So everybody out there can hear. Okay. Let's pause for a second. Like you may want to say some poetry or something so they can. Well, that one was scrappy, like the battery was dying.
That one's working now.
Okay, that one's working now.
Yeah. Why don't you sit down and it's not working?
Can everyone hear me now? Good. Okay. Yay. So we're all very familiar with this application. Little more than 1,600 acres on the west side of Campbellton Red Wine Road, between Campbellton Red Wine and the Chattahoochee River, all south of Jones Ferry Road. There are several requests being made by the applicant. One is for a rezoning from the RL Rural District to HMMU Mixed Use Hamlet. There are 3 variances and 5 special use permits that go along with it. The variances are first a variance from section 6.3.c of the Unified Development Code to reduce the minimum residential units required in the HMMU district from 0.5 units per acre to 0, and to increase the maximum allowable percentage of property devoted to non-residential units from what would normally be 25% of the developable area to 100% of the developable area. The second one is a variance from section, the UDC section 5-6.g to increase the maximum open space which can be transferred offsite from 20%, which is the normal number for a hamlet, to 50%. And the third one is a variance to eliminate all of the requirements of Article 12 regarding thoroughfares in those portions of the development to which public access is restricted, which would treat it more like a industrial or business campus rather than a what we normally think of as a hamlet. If I may explain a little bit of number 2 as well, the increase in off-site open space, which can be transferred off-site. What this does is it allows a developer in a hamlet or village to increase the amount of land they can develop within the district by preserving more land outside the district. In order to preserve the overall ratio of open space, they would need to preserve more additional land than they're actually gaining on the inside and developable area. And so what it actually does is it kind of shifts the benefits of the open space outside of the district from inside the district to the outside the district. And then finally, the 5 special use permits are one, of course, for a motion picture or sound recording facility, large, one for a hotel, one for a college, university, or professional school. And this is intended to be for training in motion picture, arts and technology, an event center, large, which in the conditions we have conditioned to no more than 250 guests. And then finally, a recycling center, which would be focused and conditioned to focus on recycling materials generated on site from the destruction, I guess, of movie sets. We had a hearing at the last Planning Commission meeting, had quite a few people in the audience speaking up about it. In the end, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval with the recommended conditions, acknowledging though that there were a couple of conditions that needed a little bit more attention. They were at the time numbered 13 and 19. Staff has since been through the conditions a bit and has made a few other relatively minor, for the most part, changes, although they're not all entirely minor. What you have in front of you with the conditions is a red line version showing what the Planning Commission voted on, and then what has been done with it since then. So you can see what the recommended changes are. If you would like a clean version of either of those, I'd be happy to supply one. But this shows you in one document, you can kind of see what both versions are. Number 13, condition number 13 had been all about the applicant preserving land as a part of the farm agricultural commons program. That's something the applicant has talked about and something the applicant wants to do. But at this point, there's not enough information for them to make any particular promises on what they're going to do. So probably what will happen is if they do move open space offsite and they need more land, they've reserved a little bit of land that they own that they can use, sell themselves TDRs off of or something. But the additional land, they would probably do that kind of preservation for any additional open space that they need to move offsite. And then number 19.
Just to be clear, something like that would come before council if they did that.
That's correct. That's correct. The any use of that moving open space offsite will require a change. Any significant use of that would require a change in the concept plan. There are little changes around the edges that they might be able to do since it's conceptual. So there might be an opportunity to preserve some land offsite, but any significant amount would require a concept plan change, and that would come to council certainly for approval.
Oh my God. Oops. So there had been a question about where would their land be offsite, but it's not designated, not needed at this point. So
That's
there
right.
is no designated
That's right.
offsite.
It's not designated. As I mentioned, they do own a little bit of land. Part of what had been their original application last year up on the other side of Jones Ferry Road, north of Jones Ferry Road, they have, I think it's about 60 acres. I don't know that I remember that, about 60 acres up there that is not part of this rezoning. And that's land that they could certainly use to sell themselves TDRs or preserve and get credit for that preservation. But aside from that, yeah, none of it is done. And then of the other two that were called out specifically by the Planning Commission, number 19 is historic preservation. And there's been a change of language there. It used to refer to the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And now the language really just refers to kind of best efforts. And if the whole thing is torn down by a tornado, they're not liable for that by any means. If you have any questions about that language, I'd be happy to answer them. We also had one particular planning commissioner who was hoping for a little more robust discussion on a few topics, including sound, light, and use of the fire department, which I can talk about a little bit. We added a condition simply acknowledging the existence of and their requirement to live by the noise ordinance and the night sky ordinance that are already in the code. And then the short answer for the use of the fire department equipment is we have conditions where the applicant will be purchasing the city a fire truck, a ladder truck, and if the city requests it, also providing land to build a station. As far as dedication of equipment and personnel for the movie studio itself, that would be normal operations, just like any production that comes into the city. Anything dedicated would be off-duty personnel, and actually the fire chief, I'm sure, would be happy to talk about this a little more. But it's all in the same as our normal course of operations with productions these days.
And the most particular thing there, and Greg, if you want to come up and speak to this, is that if there is a fire station on the property, and there is a fire outside of the property, that fire station rolls to that fire outside, just like any place else. It's not.
Right, it's normal operation for us. So that fire station is a part of our network of service. Okay, so it would respond in there if there's a call. It would respond anywhere else if there's a call. And if it responds anywhere else, and then there's a need within Kane Studios, the units that would have been directed to backfill that station would be available to serve their needs. And that is true within our jurisdiction as far as our resources, but also influence, or as it involves the automatic aid resources of Palmetto and City of South Fulton and COED if we have to ask for that. So that's the normal thing that we do every day.
There had been some conversation online about the idea that the ladder truck would be only used in the studio, and that's just not the case.
Not at all.
Wanted to make sure that we stay on that.
Thank you.
And so that's all I had. The recommendation from Planning Commission was for approval with the conditions that they had in front of them at the time, with again calling out those two in particular for special attention.
We also have the applicant and the engineers here. If anybody has any questions for them about anything. We've got a lot of opportunity to talk about this already, but anything you guys want to say? No. Wise man. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I was.
What number are you?
There we
Oh,
go.
there you go.
No, I just noticed condition 32, which I thought was a nice add that talks about if circumstances arise that are not addressed.
Oh, that's right. The final,
Yeah.
final condition, and it was actually at the recommendation of the applicant. Typical language from some contracts. It says if a circumstances arises that is not addressed in these conditions, the owner agrees to cooperate with the city in good faith to come to a mutually agreeable solution. Which sort
Because
of,
the idea is you never know, right? Something will
Right.
come up and.
It's
And I appreciate that too from the long list of, but what if, but what if?
Yeah,
but if,"
right.
and we don't know a lot of
That's right.
the what ifs.
it's hard to presuppose
So I
everything.
appreciate that condition as well.
Great. All right. Thanks. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Next is our budget adoption and where we are in that process. Rob, you want to update us there?
All right. Let's see what we got here. All right. The moral of the story is don't be afraid of the mic. Get close. Get real close, Mike. To the mic. The budget. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Welcome to June. June is the time of year where the sun comes out, but it's also time you approve the budget. Let me flip to my right page here. This is kind of the second draft that you have in front of you, and it's a additional iteration, but it'll continue to change. Today's June 1st, and it's got to be adopted before June 30th. And we're going to set that next meeting here soon because we have to advertise the public hearing for that. It can be online, it can be on Zoom, as long as you just have that second public hearing and you have the quorum. So where we're at today is, I always like to point, I should go where the mayor always jumps in and I love when he does this because he talks about I say the overall budget, but he kind of breaks it down. You know, he talks about like, look, it's not $11 million budget. It's more of a $4.5 million budget. If you look, and I did a memo a little bit differently or better actually, if you will, because I put another column on page 2 that talks about year-to-date revenues and expenditures and such. So it gives a better picture. So whereas we talk, it's very small print, by the way, we talk about 10.366 million is the overall budget that was approved. The general fund was amended at 4.1 million. So we've collected 4.9 million. We're looking at 4.5 for next year, again, being very conservative. So going across the spreadsheet on the bottom of page 2, again, I'm sorry, it's very small print. You can see where the general fund, the debt service fund, hotel, motel, technology grants, capital equipment, T-SPOS, and then the reserves are very similar across the board, except for, let's say, T-SPOS is higher because we got fund balance now, but we're collecting more, but we're getting ready to let a really, really big project that's going to come before you July 11th. So we want to get that for you. So that's going to take the chunk of this, all of the T-SPOS really, along with some more reserves that we were programming for a big paving project. And the other funds are very similar with debt service. Going up a little bit because we did purchase a fire truck, but we only have one more payment on some public works equipment. So next year that'll go down. So going through, I've got the statement of revenues and expenditures there for you to review, as well as different versions of the revenues and expenditures broken down in more detail. And then at the very end are the fees that are in place that are part of the budget too. So all our fees that we have to adopt in order to, charge for services, which is part of the budget. But that's kind of an overview. I don't want to go into great detail because the reason I don't want to is because the budget you're looking at right now is going to change a little bit more because we have one more month of expenditures. We got one more month of revenues. We have 2 areas, particularly T-SPOS and hotel motel, that are 2 months behind, that are not, and lost local option sales tax. Those are 2 months behind, but we're going to program as if those are coming in so we can have a more accurate picture of our reserves. Because what's important, as you know, those reserves are what we program for capital, and the capital budget's in here too. So what we don't program in capital, I mean, we'll program specific things, but we put 300,000 toward roads and stuff, but we get more specific when it comes to the police department. We'll put in there $45,000 for a car, or if Greg needs some more air cylinders and he needs $10,000 for that, we get specific in those areas. But sometimes we'll just put police capital, we'll put parks capital, we'll put public works capital. So those are areas that are catch-alls. However, if it's over $15,000, it still has to come back to you for approval. And as you know, in my history, even if it has been approved in the budget, it still comes before you guys to also approve it in a council meeting, because again, my threshold is $15,000. But that's kind of a general overview. I mean, the mayor can jump in here because he's been very participative in this part.
I got a quick comment to make.
Yeah.
So we're going to have that additional meeting, the additional public hearing toward the end of the month to get ready for the final adoption. We'll go through the fee structure a little bit more than some of the fees that have been set, all of that, because there's some background material that I've asked folks to get together. So we can talk about that a little more specifically. I'll send an email out when I get home tonight to try to schedule that. And then the other point that Robbie made, I just want to highlight this. A big chunk of our reserve is going to be going out for paving this year. We're going to do by far our largest paving package ever. We've talked about this before. We've been saving money to do that because the more you do, the lower your per mile rate is. And so we're doing a very significant one, but it's a big part too of why knowing exactly where we're ending up in reserve by the end of the month, so that when it comes in July, we're able to say, we're going to be able to do exactly these sections of road and exactly. We've got 2 different things going on. One is a last little bit of some of the full depth reclamation in some places. And then also a couple places where we have to do a thicker, kind of more traditional paving layer. And then we've got this other company that is doing one that's a little bit thinner layer. It's a process that lets you do a lot more mileage for a lower cost in places where you don't need to do as much repair work. And anyway, I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that as they're looking at the budget, because it does look like we've got a lot of extra money, but that's pretty much all spoken.
Yeah,
for.
that was intentional for, like the mayor's talking about, this big paving project. And our goal, as I had another conversation today with our engineers, is we have to advertise. Yes, the pressure paving is a sole source. They got 4 US patents. However, it's a project over $100,000. It's got to be by Georgia law. To me, it's got to be an RFP. It's a very special type of paving process. And the other part is not. It's your typical, any company can come in and do the second part. So it's almost like 3 RFPs rolled in one. We're trying to. It's like your pressure paving, it's like your traditional paving, and then it's your striping. Let's not forget the striping. So all those come into play. But like the mayor said, that's the biggest project you've ever done in the city, the history of the city, as far as paving the roads. My sound guy.
Get Greg on there. Okay, so I'm just asking because it's a little thing, little things we asked for. I was surprised we got the portalet at Hutchinson Ferry Park. So we've talked about the grant writer and there was a specific person you were interested in, but we were hoping that if
Yeah.
that didn't happen sooner or later, are we moving forward on that or?
Yeah. We have money programmed for grants. We have an amount set for that. And what I've done is I got an RFQ I put out for grant writers, and they do by the hour. And we can use that company to, if we have a specific grant or if we have an area, let's say we're looking for a grant in, we want to get charging stations for EVs, electric vehicles in our parks. That's kind of specific, kind of general. Will you help us get a grant for that? Yes, we'll go to that group. Or if it's a larger grant, a lot of strings attached, like the federal grants that are out there for infrastructure type improvements, there'll be more hours attached to that. But all we got to do is come back to you and say, hey, we only budgeted X amount. We need more to pay this company.
What we've talked about is bridging the gap between now and when we can get this guy here, because this guy has both the grant writing experience at both the federal level and the smaller level, and planning experience that help back up our planning group. But in the meantime, we want to be working on some grants.
How
Yeah.
long is that gap?
We're not
Well,
sure.
you know, I mean, I wish I did. I'm glad I mentioned it, you know, because I'm in communication, but anything can happen. There's no guarantee. You know, this individual to me fits the mold because, again, what the mayor saying, there's a lot of components that he can provide, is a certified planner and also a grant writer. But in the meantime, I don't even want to, I'm going to pretend like he doesn't exist because
So,
to me, he doesn't right
In
now.
the meantime, rather than, it seems just a little reactive to kind of wait till something comes along and then hire someone to do it. Could we program some money to get a person and outline a grant program for us, look to see what's available, and then when those deadlines are, and then give that presentation to council? Because we get them one off at a time, and by that time we get them, it's too late to apply for them.
The
Right.
money
Right.
that we've got in the budget for that will
Can
Mhm.
we
allow
can
us
do
to do
that?
that.
Right.
So let's program
Right.
it that way. Yep.
Ruby, does that answer your questions too? Yeah. Okay.
No, that makes perfect sense. Mhm.
Yes, I know.
Be
There was a lot of
proactive.
them last year that we did not turn.
Yeah, and the key is having those contacts with those federal folks. Like I sat next to John Ossoff's chief of staff the other day, and we talked about grants and stuff. He goes, "Here's my card. I can help get that through." That kind of stuff.
Good deal. All right. Any other budget questions? If not, the next one is it is the special use permit for the event center that we were talking about on Wilkerson Road. They've asked us to withdraw that. And so what I'll do at that point in the meeting is ask for a motion to withdraw that without prejudice, which means that he can then work on that and come back in when he gets it sorted out. I know several of us have talked to him about the fact that he really needs to, get with his neighbors and size that project in a way that doesn't get the kind of pushback that he got. And he seems to have heard that message. So we're going to give him the opportunity to do that. As Lori.
Planning Commission pretty much had that same recommendation, so I think that we kind of go with that too. Just wanted to mention that.
No, that's right. Thanks for mentioning, because that is where that came from. Next up is the item about the qualifying fees, Dana.
I don't like that. I want to be on all the time.
So, earlier this year, we adopted a resolution setting the qualifying fees And state law dictates what we can set that as. And it's 3% of the mayor and council salaries. So council salaries for the districts that are up for reelection will increase next year. And we base that 3% on that new salary, but as I'm preparing for the call for election and going through all my stuff, I realized that it needed to be set at this year's salary. It says the preceding years. So it's going from 108 down to 36.
Sounds good. All right. And then the next one is Mike again. It is a rezoning application for 23-ish acres over off of off of Watkins Road.
It's mostly on Watkins Road, mostly on Watkins Road. There's another piece way over on the other side off Atlanta Noonan Road, actually landlocked down at the end of Rock Hill Road. So 3 parcels. The proposal is to rezone from RL rural to HMMU mixed use hamlet to expand the Serenby hamlet, little over 23 acres. It includes one large single family lot, which is just south of their recently rezoned F farmettes or F lots. And it will be connected to that. Their plan is to add a couple more lots in the F farmettes area. And the open space will sort of lap over onto this new parcel. And then the existing home site on that parcel will be defined as a lot, a 2-acre lot. So it's existing, nothing new there. And then there's also a small parcel on Watkins Road, 1 acre, that would be simply incorporated as part of the open space. You remember how in the F lots there's open space surrounding a developable area. They'd be incorporated into 1 or 2 of the open space portions of the F lots. Lot F1, maybe F2 also. That might only be F1. And then way over on the other side is a lot adjacent to the art farm. And it was actually a part of the art farm buffer variance that came in last year. But it is next to an existing single family parcel over there at the end of Rock Hill Road. And it will end up being mostly buffer for whatever happens over with that back portion of the art farm property.
Accidentally, even though it was in the buffer variance, wasn't actually.
That's right.
rezoned.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So this cleans that up. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about this?
I don't have any question, but I want to thank Arnie for taking me on the walkabout back there to look at how those lots flow and the open space and the beautiful gravel road they put in there. And it's what my road wants to be when it grows up. Not that, just having the utilities buried, it's such a pretty road. And something she said to me, I just want to share, because my tagline recently has been, I wish there was a rural safe zone. And the way that they've clustered these 4 lots and done the open space around it does really provide a rural safe zone. Because walking down Watkins Road now, she's saying no one can build here, no more curb cuts, no more curb cuts. And I go, that's about the best it's going to be. So I appreciate that. I was really impressed. I want to say thank you.
That's right. The Watkins Road stuff does create additional buffer along the road, which is one of the things we're looking for.
I appreciate too the fact that we did cluster these means that we've got more contiguous open space. So it's a good addition to the plan. Ruby, any thoughts? Nothing? Okay. All right. So that's that. If anybody has any other questions, and that is it for our agenda review. And then there was an item that, because of some miscommunication around schedules, we did not get on the agenda, but was something that we've been talking about even in the previous meeting, having a presentation from the folks who've been working on the RICO Historic Crossroads Plan. If you'll remember, in the last 2 comp plans, we talked about how to activate RICO, and we've had actually several processes since then too. A Georgia Tech student studio and ULI, the Urban Lands Institute, has done a studio. Both of those processes kind of informed this process, as well as the comp plan stuff. And Greg, if you want to come up and walk us through that. Do we have a presentation ready for that, Robbie? And also contextualize, right? Like, what is this thing you're showing us, right? Appreciate it.
So I can just start talking here before it comes up. Can we go to the first slide? Can you all hear me? Yeah.
Yes, you have to
Good.
lean in on that one.
Yeah. So we have been working on this for quite some time, both with staff and mayor and some of the council people, as well as residents from the Rico community and landowners from the Rico community. So we feel good about that community process. And still waiting for that first slide to come up. But it's an amazing opportunity. Rico is the kind of the civic space of the Chat Hills. You've already put your city hall here. It has great historic structures and traditions and history. So it really wants to be done
It's not
right.
just the map, though. He's looking for the presentation.
Yeah.
There's a first slide on the presentation.
Where's Katie, you sent that to? Okay, good. So I just want to reinforce that you know, this, the quality of the civic space is important. The quality of the functional destinations is important. Rico used to be a vibrant place that offered a lot of services to the surrounding folks, and over time it has lost a certain amount of that vitality and vibrancy, and that's a normal process. You know, people became more kind of focused on commuting to different things, you know, ceased using some of the local things. And I think the challenge in Rico is we don't want it to just turn into just this little kind of tourist stop along the road. You want to maintain that cultural vitality and vibrancy, and one of the things that came out from the last session was that, you know, because there have been a number of businesses that have been lost there that serve the community, how does one bring some of those back? Not going to bring all of them back, and times have changed, so businesses are different. But how are you going to bring some of them back? And the city is well placed with the 40-something acres they've got there to help incentivize some of that. So you've got private properties kind of that, you know, hover around the city property, and then the city property. Some of the, you know, institutions that are here, I mean, you all are all familiar with them. The Smith Grocery is phenomenal, and Mr. Smith is still there. One of the concerns that came up recently was that in order for spaces like the Smith Grocery to continue, it needs to be not overly regulated. In other words, if there are functional parameters that need to be added to make it function, then those need to be taken into consideration, while still holding together the historic character and so on of the place. The churches, you know, vital at the intersection of the crossroads. And so on. So next slide. So I've mentioned some of the key objectives here. What you're seeing there, that circle around Rico is kind of the immediate surrounds. One of the consistent objectives in the Chat Hills has been to make things a little more compact, preserve the rural character, and try to create some walkable environments. Those should not usurp the, you know, destinations. You know, I need to get somewhere and pick something up and then leave. But at the same time, there should be plenty of nice places to walk and you know, make an evening of it in Rico. Part of that is well, so what we focused on was making that future expansion more compact, not let it expand into the residential zones around, which different residents had expressed to, not have commercial just suddenly show up in their front residential door. And then the other piece is to make a conscious effort to protect, while still valuing the properties, the open space that's around Rico, so that there's actually the opportunity to get on a trail in Rico, have dinner, go buy a few things, and then take a walk, take a walk down a trail. So next slide. So this kind of shows, this map is intended to show the surrounding larger open spaces. And we're in conversation with some of those owners. And so the intent is to, look at those lands and help activate some farm aspects that would have been there a while back and that have kind of disappeared, while also helping them value the land in terms of, development opportunities. Next slide. So now there are really 4 zones we identified in this initial boundary for Rico. That doesn't mean that boundary can't change. We've tried to be both efficient, efficient with this and not just have it spread out everywhere. So what the first boundary, which is the purple one, is the historic crossroads, the churches, the Smith store, the heart of this historically. The second one, which is I guess I'm not real good with colors, but the darker kind of purple area right below it. Magenta, thank you. So we're calling that the quotations Rico Main Street. And the reason we're calling it Main Street is it has the least amount of traffic. Campbellton, right now, folks move down Campbellton at 50 miles an hour. That's an easy rate. Rico, because it comes to a stop at the crossroads, is more calmed and has more potential for pedestrian traffic and so on, making it a decent main street. The third one, the orange, is the city property. The lower half of it, as you'll see in the initial opportunity map that we did, is largely park because of the streams and wetlands and so on. The upper portion, as we've seen in the previous studies with Georgia Tech and ULI, has some nice opportunities to kind of reinforce that crossroads kind of nature. I know it's going to come back. The fourth zone, I don't know if y'all remember it, but it's there it is, the yellow zone. The yellow zone is really a little opportunity zone that is intended to be more residential in nature. But the reason it's an opportunity is you've got Kite Road and Mixon, and they are, anytime you've got kind of a confluence of circulation ways, roads, the light surface ones give nice opportunity for residential development in a small community like that. So that could be a little more compact residential. We're not suggesting super high density residential there. Something that just works well with the streets and so on. Next slide. Okay, so this is what we call the opportunity map. I wish I had a little pointer.
Yeah.
Make all the difference in the world. And it's a little hard to see, but I guess that one's not so bad. Where's that little long bamboo thing
Oh,
we had last time? Because I could reach that screen.
remember you had that pole, yeah.
If it's handy, yeah, please. Yeah. And I'll talk y'all through that real quickly. And we've The intent of this opportunity map is to look at the community infrastructure, because if you just let development happen, then things like walking trails and things of that sort, have a harder time happening. So we've identified some of the community infrastructure. We've talked to landowners here, and we've kind of put them in what I would call a phase one. So the intent here is to move slowly, not fast, not grow a bunch of stuff, but give you a map that can develop over time.
It's just nothing but the finest here.
Does the wiggle. All right. So.
No, don't. Just,
All right, so.
you've already got Bill Creel rolling his eyes back there, and I feel you, Bill. I feel you. I know. I hear you.
So again, to just go over one or two of the things I just spoke about, this part of Rico Road really lends itself to slowing down and a nice pedestrian. And so on. That's how we're calling this the kind of Rico Main Street. Then Mixon here, and this was initially proposed by the Georgia Tech group that came through. It's designed to come through in a very light road. This could even be a gravel road. And it can actually connect across Rico to help activate a few of these parcels here. So that's Mixon. And then of course,
through the city property.
and that's coming through the city property. Yep. This, of course, Kite Road, this is that residential area, both this area and this area that could have, slightly denser housing, but we're not talking high density, kind of hamlet housing. So those are the primary gestures. That's City Hall right there. So now let me talk about the kind of phasing idea here. So the first phasing, the first thing, and these are people that have talked about their properties for a while, the Tom Swanson triangle with the artist studios, that's clearly something that Tom wants to get going and could start to activate. This area here is Bucart land. This area all in here and back and all around. We've had initial discussions with Mr. Bucart, and we need to follow up with that. But the intent there is to get something that some development that'll help create a bit of a gateway as you come in from the northeast into Rico, but at the same time preserve land right adjacent to Rico that for a farm next to Rico. So you could literally walk to UPIC and have a vent barn and things of that sort. And again, the intent here is to think civic, this is not just a specialized high-end market kind of thing. And that's the theme in this process. And if I can say, what we're trying to do is balance services, down-to-earth services that people need in the community with a few nice destination. Those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum of what make it work economically. So that's the second part, is this portion here, the Bucart portion. Then we have the Mark Prater land, and we spoke with him for quite some time. What's interesting about this land is it is right at the juncture of Rico. Of both roads, Campbellton and Rico, and there's really no large outdoor living room where people can have market spaces or events and things of that sort. That really doesn't exist at the crossroads, and that property is perfect for that. And so that phase one might look like, starting to look at what that kind of civic space would look like, as well as the kinds of buildings that Mark could develop adjacent and kind of framing that space. So that's Then this is not necessarily in a specific order, but just the main components. So then the other piece, or another piece, which is really an infrastructural piece, we want to put this, what we call a pedestrian spine, which is basically allows you to have a really nice walking trail coming all the way through Rico, literally starting up in this, Bucart farmland, if that happens, come all the way through Rico, through the city property and down to the city park. Ultimately, at the other end, going through Bucart, it could be a trail that winds up at Turkey Creek. So you could literally walk from Turkey Creek through town and then down to the city park. So that's then the other part of the pedestrian connectivity is a couple crosswalks at I'm losing the name of it. What's the name of this street? Campbellton, at Campbellton. Campbellton, as it comes through Rico, needs to be calmed down a little bit, or there's going to be some accidents. And so there's a strategy for, bringing that as it comes around the curve up on the west side, bring it down to 30, 35 miles an hour, and then bring it down to about 20 miles an hour as it comes into town with a couple stop signs. And what that will do is make it safe for people to actually walk around. And it's a very old pattern. If you look at traditional small towns, every one of them, as you go through, nobody goes through a traditional small town at 50 miles an hour. Now, not that this is a town, but Rico's a crossroads. And so it's okay to pause when you get to that and then pick your speed back. So anyway, that's the pedestrian connectivity. Other projects, we've got the community garden going in at City Hall. Community garden and of course the food pantry that's there. Smith Grocery expansion, we've talked briefly to the Smith family, and as I mentioned, one of their concerns was they didn't want it to be overly regulated so that the future store would adapt for a new owner while still retaining a lot of the character of the store. The churches, we've not talked to the churches, but of course they are central to the crossroads, and some real thought needs to go into that to the churches and how best to maintain them as institutions in the town. At City Hall, the Public Works Department, it's down here right now. It would have a phase one, as we're thinking about it right now, building a movable shed. It needs a shed expansion, but making that movable so that in the long term, that public works area would find its home not too far away, but in another location. Where does that leave us here? Works. Okay, then initiating the city park. That land is beautiful with the streams and so on, and right on top of Rico. So making that happen. And then kind of lastly, and there are other things, but these are the main things, really assessing the wastewater for this wastewater treatment. For the phase one, there's not going to be much stuff, and so that might look like a lift station and a nearby septic field, that's used for those two or three things that are taken off. In the long term, there's going to need to be some collaboration, both with developers in the area that are going to be doing their own wastewater treatment, and possibly county infrastructure, and that's all being thought. So that's the phase one for the plan. Good place to stop. Questions? Mike.
The last two plans didn't focus far enough. It just focused on
Yeah.
the 45 acres. So you've
Yeah.
extended that. I like that it's incorporated some of Bucart's property
Mhm.
and farming components, open space components. And the opportunity map is just that. It's nothing
Yep.
set in stone. It's not anything the city is going to pay for. It's as Mark Prater or Tom Swanson want to create something on their property, here's the opportunity and some thought we put into it. There was some initial concern from Sarah Kinzer that something would be developed on Mixon Road because we were calling the road across from Mixon an extension of that. We just need to
Yeah.
call it a different name,
Yeah.
so
Yes,
it's clear. It's
Yeah.
just,
absolutely.
it's just a through road
Absolutely.
on the city
To
property.
leave that historic benefit
Right.
of the Mixon Road and not, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But, and I like the idea of of some type of shared septic system to start with. If we're gonna have little businesses there, I guess the zoning will come after this to say, you know,
Yeah.
these businesses can be on smaller acreage. As a historic district, but you know, you don't want to have a septic system on every half acre or whatever. So
Mm-mm.
having that central location, I think that will be a benefit and maybe encourage businesses to come and set up something. And I guess some design standards will follow. So
Yeah.
I'm really pleased with all the work you guys have done and it's really thoughtful. I'm pleased with that.
Thank you.
Waiting, there you go. I was looking at the map, so it ends right before the fire station?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I see that that was included in the past, or in some original mapping, that in the ballpark and that?
There were, it did extend further. What we did was we created, trying to not just have it keep expanding and keep expanding. We created open space there. And then we identified the intersection at Rico, what's the cross? At Upper Wooton as a small crossroads. So the ballpark, the Boy Scout hut and so on, all would be made into something nice there, but without growing it all the way up into the other space.
It's important to recognize, right, that when we had these conversations in the comp plan process, we always said that this is kind of the area that we're looking at, but a lot of what's going to happen is going to depend on how the neighbors right there feel about it.
Yeah.
And so in this process, they talked a lot to the neighbors in the area, and the neighbors down around that Upper Wooton Crossroad didn't really want anything down there.
Yeah.
Whereas the people that own land up here in the actual downtown little piece of Rico did.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what directed the focus of now where the attention has been put.
Yeah.
Very responsive to the way that the landowners actually felt about it.
Yeah.
So Tom, does that, and I was a little confused because I thought the gravel side of Upper Wooton was where Buchart's Village would be activated. And somehow in my mind, I had them coming down that road. But that's, well, there's no plans for it yet,
Yeah, I
but
don't
was
think
that your
so. I
thought?
don't
Okay.
think that's the way that's gonna happen. And the other thing too is to the point about what's next, right? So the next step is a very light kind of, historic district overlay zoning.
Yep.
That talks about what the uses are, and they would be the kind of small scale uses that you would expect to see in a little community like this, maybe a barber shop or, if you've got the store maybe next to it, a little tiny cafe or something like that. And you made the point, and you made the point as well, that this is kind of an opportunity plan. There's not huge demand for a ton of stuff right now, so nobody's expecting there to be this huge swell of businesses. But the Smiths, for example, talked a lot about the fact that they want to be able to add a couple things to that store in the course of time. And this allows the opportunity for things like that to happen. And, Mark Prater is very interested in doing a couple little things there, and Tom Swanston is. And so there's some energy around some small things right now that this will absorb. And having that little piece of zoning that lets that happen and talks about, how big the lots can be and what the setbacks are and how they relate to each other is an important piece of making that happen. And then, the historic guidelines, because the conceit has always been that, some of these little towns stay vibrant and some don't. And what would Rico have looked like if the 2 general stores or the 3 general stores had stayed open and, just for whatever reason, more of that life had stayed here, making sure that whatever gets built fits into that looks like it's been here for 100 years. And it's been a part of the community, that it fits in with the church and it fits in whatever. And so we've got a path to doing that over a couple months. And I think, you'll have something in front of you guys to look at with those details in a fairly short time period. I think we've got a really good quick way to do the historic guidelines, for example, some good ways to get that done. So.
And the other thing not to forget, I kind of started off talking about the community infrastructure. If you don't map out those pedestrian trail connectivity systems and things of that sort that make it a really pleasant town, then growth won't come as readily. But the nicer it can be as far as those relationships and the planning. And then you get a couple of the initial pilot projects going, then it could really start to catapult and bring small businesses in.
This-
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait for, with the paths, about how much walking area will that be? Will that cover like 2 miles, a
It's
mile?
considerable. You
It's,
still,
you know, when you think about it, the park part of this is about 20 some acres,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you think about the amount of trails that you can put in a 20-acre park, just that's a fairly significant thing. If it does end up connecting and, you know, one of the requirements of our zoning is that if you're a developer, you have to connect to our trail network.
Mhm.
Right? So if it does end up connecting to the trail network that, you know, for example, goes to Cochrane Mill Park through the Bucart property or whatever, you know, it could be a way to get to the park or whatever. I mean, it's an interesting way to kind of make that network happen.
yeah. So I think to answer your question, yeah, a couple miles in that area, but then connectivity could, you know, somebody want to take a longer walk, they could. And this is the Farmer D consulting team. So what I love about working with this team, my background is more in planning and urban design and all that. Darren's background is in farming. And so we bring those two together. You know, traditional towns had farms that came up to them. And so it's kind of safeguarding that opportunity so that now imagine a variety of activated farm things going on right next to town.
That you talked to that said, you know, we want a farmer's market. It makes
Yeah.
sense to have a farmer's market here.
Absolutely.
And they're just going to be hopping up and down when they see the opportunity
Yeah.
map that it's there.
Well, and then opportunities for, families to, whatever, pick berries and whatever. But with production actually there as well.
I'm still holding out for the seed and feed to move.
Well,
there,
that's,
you know.
I think Darren has that clearly in his sights.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Okay,
That's
Did I say
good. Thank
Cochrane Mill
you.
State Park? Sorry.
all right.
No, thank you so much. Anybody
Yeah.
else, Ruby? No?
More than welcome. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you too, bearing with us with the whole schedule confusion. thing, so. And that is it. We will, actually, no, council, anybody has anything, Ruby, any announcements or anything?
We're talking about it. So, we're not going to do that presentation next week, so I'll just let people know to watch then.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, we'll probably have a more thorough version of it again as we're walking through the zoning board, hopefully pretty quickly, right? That talks to then about, what that's gonna look like as it develops and all of that. We've actually got some meetings happening next week to do that for you. So see you all Tuesday. Thanks for coming.